Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, you may want to make the power pause a little longer because this is one of these shows where we're talking about how does Ohio State replace this guy who has left? And a lot of times the answer is, well, that's kind of complicated. We're going to have to talk about a lot of people. Tony, we're going to say one guy's name on this show, and his name is not particularly long. It's just one syllable first name, one syllable last name. And so you may need to stretch that power pause out a little bit more to get us to a point where YouTube can put some mid-roll ads in here.
Well, what we'll do, let's just spell out names instead of saying them. But this is how
Name
will
of
Ohio...
semaphore? I can do this with like flags? No?
No, Tom, I don't know semaphore. Thank you for pointing that out for everybody. I appreciate it. That's great. Good job on you. Yes, Tom, we are talking about how will Ohio State replace Tywone Malone, who was technically eventually the starting three tech for Ohio State. And I know what you're saying. It's, well, the answer is very simple, and Ohio State has two guys there to now do that, and Edric Houston and James Smith. But we're not just going to do simple here. We're going to talk it out a little bit because there is also Jason Moore, and we will spend some time on Jason Moore. And there's a bunch of young guys below them and also a bunch of young guys who left. We hit the transfer portal, the entire 2025 defensive tackle class left. But let's start with the unknown to Ohio State fans of how this is going to be done in Alabama's James Smith, Tom.
Yeah, he came over from Alabama as it wasn't quite a package deal, but he and Quay Rousseau, who went to high school together and then went to Alabama together, both committed to come to Ohio State together in the transfer portal. So, I know we always say there's no such thing as a package deal in recruiting, but those guys do tend to hang out together a lot, I guess. But James Smith came over and was the number one ranked player in terms of defensive line in the transfer portal this offseason. And it is very early. It is very early. But I think the early returns at Ohio State are, trending in a positive direction there. I think there's a decent possibility you get some pretty good production out of James Smith. And, we're not, we're talking, obviously Edric Houston is part of this answer. Edric Houston is replacing Edric Houston. And Edric Houston should be a better version of Edric Houston because he's another year older and more experienced and has had another off season to go through the weight program and all that kind of stuff. So Edric Houston, I think you can take Edric Houston and Edric Houston. This is like one of these algebraic things where it's like, well, we have Edric Houston on both sides of the equation. So they're going to cancel out. We're going to remove those. And then we're going to simplify the equation to just James Smith. And we're going to talk mostly about James Smith here. So semaphore and algebra. You sure you don't want to do semaphore? You don't strike me as an algebra guy, but
Algebra is easier.
Okay, algebra is easier. All right, so we have simplified our equation. We're talking about James Smith here. And yeah, I think he's someone who's going to be at least sort of in the same ballpark as Edric Houston. At least. He may end up being, we'll see. We'll see who starts. We'll see who ends up playing more snaps. But I don't think this is going to be he is the poor man's Edric Houston. My impressions from what we've seen from him at Alabama and some of the early scuttlebutt around Ohio State is I think that James Smith is probably going to be a really, really solid addition at the three tech position for Ohio State.
And we saw him ranked as one of the number one defensive lineman, defensive tackle, at least in the portal, by one of the services. And you have to believe that comes from scuttlebutt from Alabama, right? In terms of talking about what was this guy like? Oh, this is what he was like. And then you add to that what's being heard from the Ohio State side of things. And it's like, well, yeah, this sounds really, really positive. And I like how you put it. Edric Houston is replacing Edric Houston. It's the 2.0, 3.0 that Ryan Day talks about. And so then you've got James Smith who comes in. And what I am interested to see is if things are going as well as it sounds right now, and if they continue to go as well as it sounds, how does that impact Edric Houston, who last year, the competition for his job was basically Tywone Malone, right? And who hadn't really done much of anything in his 3 years or his first 2 years at Ohio State. Edric Houston gets a little banged up, misses some camp, is back in time, but never and lost some footing, right? And then Tywone Malone takes over the job, but Edric Houston eventually grabs it back in terms of playing time, right? And Tywone Malone is starting, Edric Houston is kind of finishing. But I don't know that he was ever necessarily pushed. He was never really pushed to the brink, like really pushed to be more than he is. And I'm thinking that may happen now because going through workouts, seeing all of this, I wonder, not necessarily a wake-up call because Edric Houston is awake, he's alert, but just a realization like, okay, I'm here. I need to go here. And so I think that's going to be very interesting to watch how James Smith lifts up the room and frankly lifts up the position. I don't think there's any doubt the 3-tech position is going to be better than it was last year. And Tywone Malone was not a detriment to the defense. He was a very pleasant surprise to the Ohio State defense. But the addition of James Smith just feels like it's going to be more explosive. And then I also think just more consistent and more relentless overall.
Yeah, I like the idea that he's going to get pushed because Tywone Malone going into the year last year, no one was thinking Tywone Malone's going to be this guy who starts like more than half the games this year. And that was, as you said, it was a pleasant surprise, but he was, even at his best, Tywone Malone, I think the ceiling for James Smith is higher than the ceiling for Tywone Malone. And so you have that where Edric Houston's going to get pushed in that way. This is also, every year we always use the phrase contract year, and the traditional use of the phrase contract year is you could go to the NFL after this season. So in the traditional sense, this is a contract year for Edric Houston potentially because this will be his third year at Ohio State. The reality of college football is every year is a contract year right now in its own special way in college football for every player. But this is a year where if Edric Houston has a really good year, he could have you have a lot of these guys, Jermaine Matthews, for example, could have gone to the NFL draft, came back, probably going to be getting a little bit more NIL this year than he did last year. If Edric Houston has a year like that where, if James Smith is off to the NFL after this year, and Edric Houston could come back for a fourth year, if Edric Houston has a really good year this year, well, that's going to make Edric Houston more in demand both from the NFL and probably from Ohio State. So, there's a real opportunity. He's going to get pushed in that way as well. All of that to me suggests if you're taking Tywone Malone, who was, again, no shade to Tywone Malone, he was really solid and one of the most pleasant surprises on that 2025 Ohio State team. But I think you have an opportunity to have an upgrade from him with James Smith. And if you have Edric Houston take another step forward, because he was a 5-star player coming out of high school as well. There's a ton of potential and ton of talent there that is still sort of in the process of getting unlocked. That's a spot where between the two of those guys, we have said they're not going to be able to replace Caden McDonald. Like they brought in John Walker. He's not going to be able to do everything that Caden McDonald did. On the other side of that, in that defensive tackle equation, the 3-tech position, I think that 3-tech position could be substantially better, and it was pretty darn good last year.
Yeah, in terms of like logistically and literally replacing Tywone Malone, who had 26 tackles last year. James Smith had 28, right? But James Smith also had 6.5 tackles for loss and 2.5 sacks. The last time Tywone Malone had a tackle for loss was the Marshall game in 2024, which was 20-some games ago. So he doesn't get into the backfield the way James Smith does, the way Edric Houston does. So you would expect that there'd be more penetration from that spot this year. And I just want to mention Jason Moore, who now a fourth-year guy. I can never remember if he's fourth or fifth, and it's because he's just been around. I believe he's a fourth-year guy, and has missed like the first 4 or 5 games last year with injury. I don't know if people remember that, and started slowly and just really never got going. But he did play a play in the Miami game. He didn't play against Michigan or Indiana, but he did get on the field in the playoffs for a play. And he's the third. He's number 3 there among the 3-techs. And you'll see him a little bit, but we've continued to say I feel really good about what Ohio State has at this position. And we did 3 concerns about the defensive tackles a few days ago, and the concerns weren't all that concerning. And James Smith is one of the reasons why.
Yeah, for sure. And, Jason Moore, this is his 4th year. He was a class of 2023 guy, but he's someone who he's a little bit of insurance. He's someone who we're not talking about him a lot, but it's kind of low key important that they brought him back, because if you have an injury for one of those 2 guys, the 2 guys that we're sort of projecting as the top 2, you need someone else. And as you mentioned, all the class of 2025 defensive tackles, they're all gone. So you need someone else who is not a true freshman who can be that second guy if someone goes down. And, this time last year, we were talking about Tywone Malone very much in the same context as we're talking about Jason Moore right now, where, we're this time you go back to last spring and we're still going, well, you got to remember he played baseball at Ole Miss, so he's a little behind. And there's lots of reasons why you haven't seen a lot out of him. And then all of a sudden, boom, you saw it. And it was, for him, once again, a contract year where, okay, you're getting a little, was it focus? Was it whatever? Was it just another year in the system? Was it the Matt Patricia defense? Whatever it was, it really kind of clicked for Tywone Malone last year. It is perfectly possible. It is absolutely possible that Jason Moore could have that kind of a step forward this season. If he does, that'd be huge, because too much depth in the interior of the defense. That's not, that sounds like it's a problem. That's not a problem at all. Because with this being his 4th year, he could come back for a 5th year. He is not, this is not his final year of eligibility. So you have the possibility of, if those 2 guys do go and he takes that step forward, then he's the guy who could be, kind of the veteran presence there for them in 2027, or one of 2 guys to come back. So yeah, this is all, you don't absolutely have to have something huge out of him or a big step forward out of him, but you certainly could see that. And if you do, that's potentially a real positive for both 2026 and 2027.
Yeah, I was talking with Larry Johnson about this at the Cotton Bowl, about the example that Tywone Malone has set, that it can all come together late, and that very well could apply to Jason Moore. And he's saying, that's the plan. You've got this example. People saw it firsthand. And hopefully that happens with Jason Moore. A lot of times one requires patience, also requires belief, but then the player also has to be good enough. Tywone Malone eventually showed he was good enough. Jason Moore has shown the patience. Now he needs to show that he is, in fact, good enough. So there you go. Just some thoughts on how Ohio State will be replacing Tywone Malone at the 3-tech defensive tackle position. Should go okay. Tom, will this be easier than the replacing the starting right guard position, or?
I think this is. I think that's a different conversation, because and we literally just had that conversation, because they have so many possible answers that they're going to have an answer there. This is they have an answer, and it's a pretty good answer. So it's a little bit of a different kind of conversation, but I think it's also, those are 2 positions where they're replacing a guy, but also I'm looking at that and going, yeah, they're going to be fine.
Yeah. So there you go. If you are watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that thumbs up. We'd appreciate it. Listening, the rules. 5-star rating and review only.
Those are the rules. They're not a suggestion. It's not what we're asking. These are listen, this is Judge Dredd. Tony, can you do a Sylvester Stallone saying, I am the law? If you can, I bet you're going to get some 5-star ratings and reviews. 6 stars. Well done.
Look, if it were up to me, I'd say 2 to 3 stars tops, but it's not. The rules are 5 stars. So that will do it from here. Again, you can also find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com as well, talking about Judge Dredd and many other Sylvester Stallone movies. Tom, do you know they're doing a prequel to First Blood?
So is it like Half-Blood or like Zeroth Blood? I don't know. What is the...
I think it's probably John Rambo in Vietnam.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense.
Pre-4, I don't know.
That makes sense. Anyway, so join us on the Huddle Board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus, where we talk about what the seashells are actually used for. All right.
Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you all later.